Hey guys, welcome back to Sleeping Stone Whispers. Tonight, we're taking a slow, soothing journey into the strange world of Victorian toothache treatments, a time when pain met potions, and remedies were brewed with mystery and charm. From the clove-scented apothecaries to the quiet hum of old dental chairs, this story will drift through the sights, smells, and secrets of a forgotten age. So, find a calm spot, close your eyes, and let your mind wander through candlelit rooms and gentle whispers of history. If you love drifting to sleep with slow stories from the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the little bell. It really helps our sleepy journeys continue. It began with a quiet ache. Not the kind that screams, but the sort that hums softly at the edge of your thoughts, a pulse behind the jaw, steady as a ticking clock. Outside, London slept under a pale fog, its gas lamps flickering like tired eyes along the cobblestone street. Inside a narrow townhouse, a man named Mr. Alton Gray sat beside a small fire, one hand pressed gently to his cheek. The warmth of the fire soothed him for a moment, but the ache whispered again, dull, deep, and rhythmic. He reached for a porcelain cup beside him, the tea long cold, and breathed in the faint scent of cloves. The pain had been visiting him for weeks now, each night a little stronger, each morning a little more familiar. On the table near the fire lay a few curious things, a small tin of white tooth powder, a folded rag, and a glass vial labeled elixir of wintergreen, for pains of the mouth. The label had curled at the edges from years of dust and candle soot. He touched the vial gently, studying the cloudy liquid within. They said a drop could ease the worst ache. They also said it might make the tongue numb for a day. In the Victorian age, such warnings came quietly, usually from neighbors who had already tried. Mr. Gray sighed. The fire cracked softly, sending tiny sparks into the dim air. Beyond his window, a carriage wheel rolled by, its iron rims scraping the cobbles, fading into the fog. He closed his eyes and listened, to the wind, the hiss of firewood, and the faint echo of pain. For a moment, he thought of visiting the dentist on Baker Street, a man rumored to use silver pliers and gaslight for comfort. But the thought of those instruments made his chest tighten. Better, perhaps, to trust in powders, potions, and patience, as most Londoners did. He leaned back in his chair, the old wood creaking beneath him. The clock on the mantel ticked softly. The ache pulsed once more, but this time, slower, almost like it too was growing tired. And there, between the hum of pain and the whisper of fire, Mr. Gray began to drift, not into sleep exactly, but into a quiet place between thought and dream, where time slowed and the city outside seemed to fade. Morning arrived quietly, gray and gentle, the kind of morning that doesn't wake you, but simply waits for you to notice it. Mr. Alton Gray rose from his chair with a stiffness that felt older than his years. The ache in his jaw had settled to a dull hum, though it lingered like a shadow behind his smile. He dressed slowly, buttoning his waistcoat in the half-light, and listened to the sounds of the street outside, the clatter of horse hooves, a milkman's whistle, the soft rattle of shop shutters being lifted. London was stirring again, and so was his resolve. He wrapped his scarf tight, stepped into the cold mist, and began the short walk toward Baker Street. Each step on the cobblestones echoed faintly through the fog. The air smelled of soot and wet stone, and somewhere far off, fresh bread from a morning bakery. The dentist's shop was easy to miss. It sat between a watchmaker and a tobacconist, its sign half faded, the letters S. Whitby, dental practitioner, just visible beneath years of grime. A small brass bell chimed softly as Mr. Gray pushed open the door. Inside, The air was thick with the smell of clove oil, candle wax, and something faintly metallic. The room was dim, lit only by the pale morning light filtering through lace curtains. Against one wall stood a wooden chair with cracked leather, surrounded by curious instruments, silver pliers, delicate hooks, tiny glass jars labeled morphia, camphor, and spirit of mint. A soft voice came from the corner. "Good morning, sir. Trouble with a tooth, perhaps?" Dr. Whitby was a thin man with silver spectacles and hands that moved as though he were always handling something fragile. He spoke with the careful calm of someone who understood both pain and patience. Mr. Gray nodded, pressing his cheek. "It's been keeping me up. Some nights I think the pain itself whispers." Whitby smiled faintly. "Many patients say the same. Teeth remember things, Mr. Gray. They ache for reasons we can't always see." The dentist motioned toward the chair. "Please, sit. Let's have a look." Mr. Gray obeyed, lowering himself into the creaking seat. He could hear the faint hiss of a gas lamp being lit, the smell of warm metal filling the air. The light glowed softly, turning the dentist's silver tools into tiny mirrors. Whitby leaned close, peering into the patient's mouth with a small circular mirror. "Ah," he murmured. "There it is. A deep ache beneath an old filling. I can treat it, but it won't be pleasant." Mr. Gray swallowed, his hands tightening around the armrests. "Will it hurt?" "Only a little," Whitby said kindly. "But pain is an old friend here, Mr. Gray. It reminds us we're alive, even when we wish it wouldn't." There was something strange, almost poetic, in his tone. For a moment, the fire in the corner crackled softly, and time seemed to slow again. As Whitby reached for a vial of cloudy liquid, the faint scent of peppermint filled the room. And then, as the first drop touched the room dimmed to a soft blur. Gaslight shimmered like mist over glass, and the faint scent of clove filled the air, sweet and sharp all at once. Mr. Gray could feel the warmth of it curling through his nose as he leaned back in the creaking chair, eyes half closed. Dr. Whitby moved with the care of a man pouring tea. His fingers were steady, his breath even. Each instrument gleamed as though it carried its own quiet story. Somewhere in the background, a small clock ticked, slow and deliberate, the kind of sound that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. "Now, keep still," Whitby said gently. His voice was smooth, nearly hypnotic. "The clove oil will dull the ache for a moment. Just breathe through it." Mr. Gray nodded, his lips numb from the potion. He could taste the bitterness beneath the sweetness, a strange comfort, like the burn of brandy on a cold night. The dentist's tools whispered against metal trays, their faint ringing notes echoing softly in the small room. Whitby leaned in again, his breath smelling faintly of mint and smoke. "Strange, isn't it," he murmured, "how something so small can bring such sorrow?" Mr. Gray tried to smile, though his jaw refused to move. The ache pulsed once, sharp, bright, and then began to fade, melting into the background like a forgotten tune. His thoughts drifted. He remembered childhood winters, biting apples too cold from the frost, laughing with his brother in a field of thin snow. He remembered his mother's remedy, warm salt water and whispered prayers. The clove oil worked deeper now. He could feel its warmth spreading, wrapping around the nerve like a soft cloth. Whitby's voice continued somewhere nearby, calm and steady, almost more sound than meaning now. "Good, very good. The body always listens, Mr. Gray. It just takes time. The candle beside the chair flickered, its wax forming tiny white rivers down the brass holder. The scent of clove thickened, mingling with smoke and something faintly floral. It felt almost holy, as if the pain itself were being offered to the air. Mr. Gray blinked slowly, eyes heavy. The fire cracked in the hearth, and a trail of light trembled across the floorboards. The world grew soft at the edges. And as Dr. Whitby laid his instruments aside, he whispered something, not quite words, but something between a blessing and a sigh. Mr. Gray heard it faintly, just before he slipped into a half-sleep filled with warm light and the faint perfume of clove and candle wax. Evening crept over London like a curtain of grey silk. The fog, soft and damp, pressed close to the narrow streets, wrapping lamps in halos of dim gold. Dr. Samuel Whitby walked slowly, his coat collar turned high against the chill. His hands, still smelling faintly of clove and mint, rested deep in his pockets. He had finished his last patient an hour ago, a quiet man with tired eyes and trembling hands. The treatment had gone well enough, but the pain in that man's face lingered in Whitby's mind like a shadow that refused to fade. Pain was an old acquaintance in his profession. He could dull it, sometimes even silence it, but it always returned, in one form or another. The apothecary stood at the end of the lane, tucked between a bookseller's window and a shop that sold mourning veils. Its sign swung gently in the wind, Thorne and Sons, purveyors of fine remedies. Whitby paused before the door. The light inside was dim and amber, like honey trapped in glass. He pushed the door open. A soft chime rang. Inside, the air was thick with fragrance, cardamom, lavender, vinegar, and something bitter beneath it all. Shelves climbed the walls, each lined with glass bottles of every color, emerald, cobalt, rose, and clear crystal. Some still shimmered faintly with light from the flickering lamps. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Thorne, a thin woman in gray with a steady gaze and silver rings that glinted as she moved. "Dr. Whitby," she said with a polite nod. "You've come late this time." "I'm searching for something I can't name," Whitby replied softly. "Something for a pain that doesn't quite belong to the body." Mrs. Thorne tilted her head, studying him. "Ah. One of those pains." She turned, her fingers brushing over the bottles as she walked, glass clinking softly in the quiet shop. "You always ask for difficult things, doctor. Powders are easy. But a restless ache, that lives deeper." Whitby smiled faintly. "And yet you always find something." She stopped before a high shelf and reached for a small, square bottle filled with pale blue liquid. "This one catches the light differently each time you look at it," she said, holding it up. "Old formula. They say it calms the nerves, slows the heart just enough to let thought drift. Not a cure, more like a rest." The glass shimmered as it turned in her hand, and for a moment, Whitby saw tiny reflections, as if candle flames were trapped inside. He accepted it carefully. "How much?" "For you, doctor." Mrs. Thorne smiled faintly. "Only a promise, that you'll tell me what you dream after using it." Whitby laughed under his breath. "Dreams, is it? You're asking the wrong man." "Then maybe the right one," she replied. He tucked the bottle into his coat, the glass cool against his chest. As he stepped back into the fog, the air outside felt heavier, full of secrets waiting to unfold. Behind him, the apothecary's bell rang again, soft, distant, and fading. Like the sound of memory closing its door. Dr. Whitby's rooms above Baker Street were quiet that night. The lamps burned low, throwing soft amber rings across the wooden desk where he had laid out a neat array of powders, vials, and small brass instruments. The city murmured faintly through the window, the far-off clip of hooves, a coal wagon rolling, the sigh of rain against glass. The small blue bottle from Mrs. Thorne stood at the center of it all, catching the lamplight like a drop of moon in glass. Whitby turned it slowly between his fingers, watching it shift from pale silver to deep azure as the flame flickered. He'd treated pain all his life. Clove, morphia, laudanum, he knew them as well as his own thoughts. Yet this rest in a bottle, felt different. The liquid inside seemed alive, almost aware. He unstoppered it carefully. The scent that escaped was delicate, not medicinal, but strangely clean, like rain over chalk or linen dried in winter air. It seemed to clear the heaviness from the room. Whitby dipped a silver spoon into a small tin of white powder, one of his own mixtures, a blend of chalk, crushed mint, and a trace of quinine, and stirred it gently into a glass of warm water. The blue liquid swirled through it in soft ribbons, fading into transparency as it mixed. He lifted the glass, studying it. "A powder for every pain," he murmured. "But whose pain is this, I wonder?" He took a sip. The taste was faint, clean and metallic, like snow melting on the tongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his vision began to soften around the edges. The ticking of the wall clock stretched, slowed. The firelight thickened, its glow seeming to pulse with his breath. Whitby sat back in his chair, hands folded loosely. He could feel his heartbeat settling, calm, deliberate. His thoughts drifted toward the faces of his patients, the woman who wept quietly when he pulled her last tooth, the sailor who laughed even as his mouth bled, the little boy who held a button in his hand and said it was for courage. One by one, they appeared before him in his mind's eye, not as ghosts, but as memories suspended in amber light. Their voices blended with the soft hiss of the fire, the whisper of rain against the glass. He wasn't dreaming exactly, but neither was he fully awake. It felt as though the blue elixir had opened a small door somewhere inside him, and beyond it was a corridor lined with moments he'd forgotten. He saw his own reflection, younger, gentler, holding a child's hand in a quiet room. The child was smiling, showing a tooth that had just been freed from pain. The memory felt warm, almost holy. Whitby exhaled slowly, the glass slipping from his hand onto the desk. It did not break. The sound was soft, almost musical. As his eyes grew heavy, he thought again of Mrs. Thorne's words, "Tell me what you dream." But the thought itself drifted away, carried off by the rhythm of the rain and the long, even breath of sleep. When morning came, it did not arrive suddenly. It drifted in, pale, quiet, and uncertain, like a shy visitor at the edge of a dream. The soft light crept through the lace curtains of Dr. Whitby's room, touching the glass bottles on his desk one by one. They glimmered faintly, as though whispering to one another in a language made of color. Whitby stirred slowly. His head rested against the back of the chair, the faint scent of burnt oil still hanging in the air. For a moment, he did not remember falling asleep. Only the memory of warmth and the sound of rain lingered in his mind. He sat up. The fire had gone out, leaving only a thin curl of smoke that wavered toward the ceiling. On the desk before him, the little blue bottle was empty. The glass looked different now, duller, heavier, as if the light inside it had been spent. Whitby rubbed his temples. The ache that had haunted him for weeks, the deep, tired throb that settled behind his eyes, was gone. In its place was a stillness so complete it made him uneasy. His thoughts felt too clear, his body too calm, like the pause between heartbeats. He stood and crossed to the window. The street below shimmered with the afterglow of rain, and the fog hung low over the rooftops. The sounds of London, carts, vendors, church bells in the distance, reached him softly, as though cushioned in velvet. On the small table by the wall sat another vial, this one half filled with a thick golden syrup. Its label, written in fine, looping script, read: "Syrup of poppy and honey, for sleep, for soothing." He didn't remember bringing it home. Perhaps Mrs. Thorne had slipped it into his bag, as she sometimes did. He lifted it, watching the sunlight catch the slow movement of the syrup inside. It looked gentle, innocent even. Yet something in it glowed faintly, like a dream that refuses to end. Whitby thought of his patients again, of those who begged for rest, for relief, for even one night of peace. He wondered if this syrup might be what they truly needed, or if it promised more than it could give. A soft knock came at the door. "Doctor," called a voice from the hall, his young assistant, Thomas. "You've someone waiting below." Whitby blinked, the sound pulling him back into the waking world. "Of course," he said quietly, his voice oddly calm. "Send them in shortly." As Thomas's footsteps faded, Whitby turned the syrup bottle over once more in his hand. He thought of the word soothing. It sounded harmless. But in his mind, he could almost hear Mrs. Thorne's whisper again, not a cure, more like a rest. And as he set the bottle down, the light outside dimmed just a little, as though the city itself had taken a long, slow breath. The morning fog had thickened into a soft, silvery veil by the time Dr. Whitby opened his surgery. He preferred it that way. Fog had a way of quieting the city, blurring its edges, softening its noise, making even the sharpest things feel distant. Inside, the room smelled faintly of peppermint oil and smoke. Every instrument on the oak table had been cleaned until it gleamed, laid out in careful order like a soldier's regiment. Small forceps, burnishers, a thin hook with a bone handle, and at the center of them all, a pair of silver pliers, curved and delicate, resting upon a folded white cloth. Whitby ran a cloth over them one last time, though they did not need it. He had owned them for years, his fathers before him. They were finely made, the sort of craftsmanship no longer found in London's modern shops. The handles bore a faint engraving, "In silentium sanator," in silence, there is healing. He turned them gently in his hand, admiring how the fogged light from the window caught on the metal. In another time, they might have been mistaken for jewelry. But Whitby knew better. He had seen what these gentle tools could do, the pain they could release, the calm they could restore, and the terrible silence that sometimes followed both. A soft knock came from the hallway. "Doctor?" Thomas's voice again. "The lady is here. Miss Blackwood." "Thank you, Thomas," Whitby said. His tone was measured, patient. "Please, show her in." He replaced the pliers carefully, aligning them with the grain of the cloth. Then he stepped back, straightening his coat as the door creaked open. Miss Blackwood entered slowly. She was young, no more than 20, with a shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes the kind of gray that could not decide between sadness and fear. "Good morning," Whitby greeted her gently. "What brings you to me today?" She hesitated before answering. "It's the pain, doctor. It's been here for weeks. Nothing helps." Her hand rose to her cheek, trembling slightly. Whitby nodded, motioning toward the chair. "Let's have a look, then. Don't be afraid. You'll feel only what you must." She obeyed, settling into the chair's embrace. The leather creaked softly beneath her weight. Whitby lit a small gas lamp, its flame humming faintly. The light spilled across the silver tools, making them shimmer like stars against the dark wood. He leaned close, peering gently into her mouth. "Ah," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "There it is. The culprit." He reached for the silver pliers, slow, deliberate, as if each movement were a kind of prayer. Miss Blackwood's breath quickened. "Breathe," Whitby said softly. "The body tenses when it remembers fear. Let's help it forget." The pliers closed with a faint click. For a long moment, there was only the sound of their steady breathing, two rhythms rising and falling in a small room wrapped in fog. Then, a sharp sound. Not loud, not violent, but final. The tension left her face at once. And in its place, a quiet astonishment. Whitby placed the instrument down, the tooth within glinting faintly under the lamplight. He spoke almost tenderly, "There. The ache has gone home." Outside, the fog pressed closer to the window, dimming the light. Inside, only the slow tick of the wall clock remained, calm, unhurried, endless. Once the patient had left, Dr. Whitby remained in his surgery for a while, listening to the soft creak of the wooden floorboards beneath his own feet. The room smelled faintly of peppermint, candle smoke, and the lingering tang of antiseptic powders. He approached the chair, the same one Miss Blackwood had sat in, and ran his fingers over its worn leather. The surface was smooth in some places, cracked in others, each imperfection a quiet testament to decades of use. It was more than a tool of his trade, it was a companion in countless quiet struggles with pain. The gaslight above flickered gently, casting long, soft shadows across the walls. Whitby leaned against the chair's backrest, letting his hands rest on the curved arms. The warmth from the lamp made the leather glow faintly, amber and inviting, despite the memories it held of discomfort and fear. He closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling the combined scent of wax and wood. The ache of the day, small aches, lingering aches, not his own, seemed to seep into him, settling with a strange calm. Every sound outside the windows, from the clip of distant hooves to the soft murmur of a passing carriage, felt muffled, distant, almost like the city itself had bent its edges to accommodate rest. Whitby thought of the patients he had treated, some who had cried quietly, others who had laughed through the discomfort. The chair had held them all. And in its silent embrace, it offered something rare, a moment to let go, to breathe, to forget the sharp pulse of life for a gentle one. He glanced around the room, at the instruments arranged neatly on the table. Silver pliers, hooks, and powders, each with its purpose, each demanding respect. Yet it was the chair that had the greatest power, he realized. It offered not pain, not cure, but a pause, a stillness that made the world outside the walls less urgent, less loud. Whitby allowed himself a slow exhale. He reached for a small tin of clove powder and ran it gently between his fingers, savoring the faint aroma. The day's work had ended, yet the memory of the ache lingered in the room like a shadow at dusk. Outside, the fog rolled silently over the streets, and the gas lamps flickered in quiet rhythm. Inside, the chair held its shape, sturdy and unyielding, offering its subtle reassurance to the dentist who had spent a lifetime balancing pain and calm. For a long while, Whitby sat there, letting the warmth and the quiet embrace him. The city might wake or sleep beyond the windows, but here, beneath the soft light, there was only gentle stillness. A world paused, suspended, ready to drift into the slow, unhurried rhythm of night. Later that evening, the surgery was quiet again, but not empty. The faint scent of peppermint lingered in the air, mingling with the soft smoke of the extinguished candles. Whitby sat at his desk, polishing a small metal tool, while the gas lamp above hummed softly, its warmth brushing against the walls. A new patient arrived, a young boy, no older than 10, with wide, nervous eyes and a hand pressed against his jaw. He shuffled into the room quietly, the soft scrape of his boots on the floor echoing faintly in the calm air. "Good evening," Whitby said gently. "I hear there's a troublesome tooth. Shall we have a look?" The boy nodded, his lips pressed tightly together. He climbed into the wooden chair, which creaked softly beneath him. Whitby noticed the way the boy's fingers curled around the armrests, and he thought again how much comfort the chair provided, more than any instrument, more than any potion. He prepared the tools slowly, deliberately. The silver drill rested in his hand like a delicate brush, its edges catching the flicker of the lamp. Whitby hummed a quiet tune, almost imperceptible, a gentle song he had learned as a child, soft enough that it blended with the quiet hiss of the gaslight. The boy relaxed a little, drawn into the rhythm of the song. His fear softened, not gone entirely, but cushioned by the calm presence of the dentist and the familiar hum of light. Whitby leaned closer, his movements precise, careful. The drill spun softly, almost a whisper, like wind over distant rooftops. Each note of the song beneath it seemed to echo in the small room, wrapping the boy in warmth and safety. Minutes stretched lazily, suspended in amber light. The world outside became distant, muffled by fog, by night, by the gentle cadence of calm. Whitby worked with care, the tools glinting faintly, the boy breathing slowly, guided by the melody and the warmth of the room. When at last he set the drill down, the boy's eyes were wide, but not with fear. There was wonder there, a quiet astonishment at how something so small, so mechanical, could leave him free of pain. Whitby smiled softly. "All done," he said. "Your tooth has rested now." The boy's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. He climbed down from the chair, brushing past the warm light of the lamp, and stepped quietly into the misty London night. Whitby remained seated, listening to the soft echo of the door closing. He leaned back in the chair himself, running a hand over the worn leather. The room smelled of clove, mint, and quiet contentment. Outside, the fog drifted slowly, carrying the city's muted hum. Inside, the gentle song lingered, winding around the instruments, the chair, the warm glow of the lamp, a melody meant not for the ears, but for the mind, coaxing it toward rest. And as the gaslight flickered one last time before he extinguished it, Whitby allowed himself to drift as well, into a quiet space where the ache of the day dissolved into soft shadow and gentle music. The morning fog clung low over London again, softening the sharp edges of chimneys and rooftops. Gas lamps stood like silent sentinels along the cobblestone streets, their light diffused into gentle halos. The city felt quieter here, in this narrow lane of small shops where the scent of herbs mingled with warm bread and coal smoke. Dr. Whitby stepped carefully along the street, his coat collar turned high against the chill. He paused in front of a cluster of shop fronts, a barber's window, gleaming with polished razors, an apothecary with jars of colored powder stacked like small jewels, and a small hall with a brass plaque that read, "Odd Fellows Lodge, Meetings Daily." Each place carried its own rhythm and story. The barber, sweeping hair into neat piles, hummed a tune to the snip of his shears. The apothecary measured powders and liquids with soft precision, the glass bottles catching light like tiny lanterns. And from the lodge, muffled voices floated faintly, serious, secretive, yet oddly calming in their consistency. Whitby inhaled slowly. The smells, the quiet sounds, the gentle clatter of the street beneath horse hooves, all of it settled over him like a blanket. There was a rhythm to the city, one that did not rush, one that moved in soft waves of sound and smell. He walked past a small boy selling candied almonds, the sugar scent curling into the damp morning air. A woman at a door offered a nod, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, and a gentle chime sounded as a bell in a distant shop rang. Here, on this street, London seemed less like a bustling metropolis and more like a living, breathing organism, one that moved at the pace of careful footsteps, whispered voices, and the steady, invisible pulse of human habit. Whitby paused, letting the scene wash over him. His thoughts drifted to the patients he would see today, and the small acts of calm he could offer them, a powder, a careful word, a moment of music, the silver touch of pliers. Every shop, every corner, seemed to remind him that the city itself was a practitioner of quiet healing, its rhythms slow and deliberate, soothing in their consistency. He continued down the lane, the fog wrapping the street around him like a soft shawl, carrying the scents, sounds, and subtle magic of a city that knew how to cradle both body and mind. The fog had thickened by midday, softening the outlines of London's narrow streets and muffling the sounds of carriage wheels and distant footsteps. Dr. Whitby moved deliberately, inhaling the quiet, humid air. Each breath carried the faint, lingering scent of the apothecaries he passed, crushed herbs, spiced oils, and somewhere beneath it all, a trace of laudanum, sharp, sweet, and intoxicating, like a memory of sleep. He paused before an unassuming shop tucked between a tailor's window and a candle merchant. The sign above, faded with age, read, "Merrick's Remedies, established 1824. Whitby pushed open the door. A small bell chimed faintly, its sound diffusing into the thick air of the room. Inside, the shelves were stacked with bottles, jars, and tins, some labeled in perfect script, others scribbled in hurried handwriting. Whitby's eyes followed the trail of powders, tinctures, and syrups, each one carrying the scent of history, rosewater, camphor, opium. He caught the faintest whiff of laudanum again, a perfume that spoke of quiet rooms, faint lamplight, and the gentle hush of evening. A small figure appeared behind the counter, an elderly man with a gray beard and careful hands. "Dr. Whitby," he said, nodding. "Here for something special, I imagine." "Yes," Whitby replied softly. "Something for pain, something that offers more than a moment's relief." The man moved slowly, carefully extracting a small vial of golden liquid. The laudanum caught the light as he held it, refracting it into tiny, soft rainbows. "This," he said, "has soothed aches and eased minds for decades. But it is not for haste. One drop, taken with care, and the world seems to pause, though it does not forgive carelessness. Whitby accepted it, feeling the glass cool against his palm. He inhaled the scent, sweet, smoky, calming, with a subtle undertone of melancholy. For a moment, he imagined the countless patients who had leaned on this very remedy, sighing softly as sleep claimed them, leaving the city to move on without them. He left the shop slowly, the vial tucked carefully inside his coat. The fog outside seemed to respond, curling gently around his footsteps, carrying the faint perfume of laudanum with it. Each inhalation was like a soft exhale of the world itself, a reminder that calm could be found even amidst the bustle of London streets. Whitby walked on, past barbers and apothecaries, past the faintly chanting voices from the Odd Fellows' Lodge, each sound muted and softened by the fog. The city moved around him, but he felt a quiet, deliberate stillness within, the kind that comes from knowing that, sometimes, relief and rest lie not in action but in patience, observation, and care. And somewhere, deep in the folds of the fog, the scent of laudanum lingered, a whisper of calm, a promise of rest, a subtle lullaby carried on the breath of the city itself. By the time Dr. Whitby returned to his rooms above Baker Street, the city had hushed itself beneath a thick blanket of fog. The gas lamps flickered faintly, casting wavering pools of amber light across wet cobblestones. In the quiet, the city seemed suspended, neither fully awake nor entirely asleep, as though it were holding its breath for a moment of gentle magic. Whitby entered his room slowly, hanging his coat and placing the small vial of laudanum on the desk beside the blue elixir from Mrs. Thorne. Candlelight danced over the glass, and he watched the golden liquid swirl lazily, catching the faint shadows like trapped sunlight. He breathed in the mingling scents of clove, mint, and the faint sweetness of the laudanum, letting the aromas settle over him like a warm shawl. The aches of the day, the minor strains of his own body, the tension of restless patience, seemed to soften, smoothed by the rhythm of quiet city life and the careful work of hands long accustomed to relieving pain. Whitby sat at the desk, carefully preparing a small mixture of powders, tinctures, and the mysterious blue elixir. Each movement was deliberate, each gesture slow and measured. There was no rush, only the gentle cadence of ritual, the tap of spoon against glass, the soft hiss of candle flame, the whisper of powder as it fell. Outside, a distant carriage wheel rolled over cobblestones, muffled by the fog. Somewhere farther off, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Each sound reached him softly, like a lullaby, carrying the city's rhythm into his room. He set the final mixture aside and sat back, closing his eyes. He pictured the street again, the barbers, the apothecaries, the Odd Fellows' Lodge, each place humming its own quiet song of life. He thought of his patients, their faces illuminated by candlelight, their voices calm in the hushed rooms of his care. And then, as if carried by the city itself, a whisper seemed to drift across the room, faint, almost inaudible. It was neither voice nor wind, but something in between, a promise, a secret, a gentle reassurance. A whispered cure at midnight. Whitby allowed himself a slow, deep exhale. The tension of the day melted further. The city outside held still, the fog pressing close, the gas lamps flickering softly, the night wrapped around him like a quiet embrace. He leaned back in the wooden chair, resting his hands in his lap. The mixtures, the vials, the soft instruments, all were still. And yet, they seemed to hum faintly with memory and possibility, waiting for another day, another patient, another quiet act of relief. Whitby closed his eyes fully now. His breath lengthened. The room softened at the edges. Somewhere in the space between wakefulness and dream, the street, the fog, and the whispered remedies blended into one slow, endless calm. And at last, he let the night carry him into sleep. Even as Dr. Whitby rested above Baker Street, the day's echoes lingered in the minds of those he had treated. Miss Blackwood, the young boy, even Mr. Alton Gray, each carried the subtle imprint of calm and relief, like a soft shadow trailing behind them. In her bedroom, Miss Blackwood lay beneath a quilt of faded lavender. The gas lamp outside the window flickered faintly, casting long, gentle shadows across the walls. Her jaw no longer throbbed, the ache that had haunted her for weeks had melted into a quiet memory, softened by the warmth of the night. She drifted into a dream, one shaped by the lingering scents and sensations of the dentist's room, the faint tang of peppermint, the shimmer of silver pliers, the gentle hum of Whitby's voice like a lullaby. In her mind, the pliers became delicate wings, lifting the pain from her jaw and carrying it into the night. The young boy, elsewhere in the city, dreamed differently but no less peacefully. In his sleep, the wooden chair of Whitby's surgery transformed into a small boat, rocking gently on a foggy river. The hum of the drill became the rhythm of oars dipping into water. The golden lamplight shimmered like fireflies along the banks, guiding him toward quiet, dream-filled shores. Even Mr. Gray, who had once pressed his hand to his aching jaw beside the fire, felt the gentle tug of rest. In his sleep, the elixir's effect lingered, the ache faded into a soft pulse, like the distant toll of a church bell. He wandered in dreams through narrow streets of misty London, past barbers, apothecaries, and the Odd Fellows' Lodge, where every sound was muffled, every step cushioned by fog. Across the city, a quiet pattern emerged, a shared reverie of calm, of pain eased, of relief wrapped in gentle light and scent. The silver tools, the powders, the vials, they remained in Whitby's care, but their effects extended beyond the room, weaving through the minds of those who had trusted them. And in this twilight space between consciousness and sleep, a single truth emerged: pain could be softened, fear could be eased, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of care, of candlelight, fog, and quiet hands, could carry the mind into a place where dreams moved gently, unhurried, and eternal. Outside, London remained swathed in fog, soft and persistent, curling over rooftops and through narrow lanes like a quiet river of gray. The city moved with hushed steps beneath its blanket, muffled, distant, each carriage wheel, each footfall, each whispered voice softened to a gentle rhythm. Through the haze, the gas lamps glowed faintly, their amber light reaching into alleys and doorways, painting the fog with pools of warmth. From above, Whitby's patients slept, each in their own room, yet somehow connected by the slow, steady beat of the city and the invisible threads of care he had offered them. Miss Blackwood dreamt beneath her quilt, the room filled with a warmth that was not from the candle, but from memory, the soft hands of the dentist, the silver pliers held with precision, the hum of the gas lamp above. The fog outside her window seemed to seep into the room, wrapping her in a quiet cocoon where nothing could disturb her rest. The young boy, in another corner of London, lay tucked under a blanket, eyes closed, drifting in the gentle sway of his imaginary river. The street beyond his window shimmered faintly in the fog, carriage wheels and distant bells becoming a lullaby that guided him deeper into sleep. Mr. Gray's window overlooked the misty rooftops. The fog rolled across them like waves frozen in time, softening chimneys and railings into shapes that seemed more imagined than real. He dreamt of quiet streets, of small acts of kindness, and of the subtle hum of a world that had paused, a pause that Whitby's care had allowed him to enter. The city, for a few precious hours, moved not in haste but in rhythm, soft, deliberate, patient. The fog became a bridge between rooms, between dreamers, between the ache of the day and the peace of night. Every gas lamp flicker, every distant footstep, every sigh of the streets carried through the fog, brushing the minds of those asleep like a soft hand. In these hours, the silver pliers, the powders, and the vials were not merely tools. They were the beginnings of dreams, gentle guardians of rest, their influence extending far beyond the walls of the surgery. And as the night deepened, the city whispered in unison, quiet, steady, unhurried. Beneath the fog, beneath the gaslight, London slept, and with it, the people who had trusted a careful hand, a measured touch, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of care. Dawn arrived quietly over London, a pale wash of silver and gold spreading across rooftops and fog-laden streets. The city's soft murmur shifted with the light, the faint creak of shutters, the distant clip of horse hooves, the low hum of awakening voices, all filtered through the lingering mist. Miss Blackwood stirred beneath her quilt, eyelids heavy, the ache of the past weeks noticeably absent. She stretched slowly, feeling the memory of Whitby's careful hands and the calm touch of the chair beneath her. The dream lingered like a delicate perfume, soft and reassuring, guiding her from sleep to wakefulness without a start. The young boy awoke in his small room, light spilling through the foggy window. He sat up slowly, remembering the gentle rocking of the wooden chair, the lullaby-like hum of the dentist, and the warmth of the golden lamplight. A faint smile curved his lips, he felt lighter, freer, as though the city itself had carried away the day's burdens while he slept. Mr. Gray, overlooking the misty rooftops, took a deep breath of the cool morning air. His jaw was free of the dull, persistent throb. The city's quiet rhythm, distant church bells, the soft shuffle of footsteps on cobblestone, the rustle of fog in the trees, welcomed him gently into the day. He felt unusually serene, the lingering calm of the night folding itself into his morning routine. Each patient, in their own space, experienced the same gentle awakening, a sense of relief carried from the night, a soft continuity between dream and day, and a quiet gratitude for the invisible care that had guided them there. And somewhere above Baker Street, Dr. Whitby began his own morning. The gas lamp outside his window flickered one last time as the sun's pale light pressed into the room. He inhaled the mingled scents of clove, laudanum, and mint, and for a moment, the room felt like the threshold between two worlds, one of night and calm, one of day and motion. Whitby moved slowly, with no hurry. He knew that the city would continue to wake, that streets would fill with life and noise, yet he carried the quiet of the night within him. Every patient's gentle awakening was a reminder that even amidst discomfort, even in the hum of daily life, there could be moments of rest, clarity, and peace. And as London stretched and yawned beneath the fog, a delicate rhythm lingered in its streets, a rhythm of care, patience, and quiet recovery that would echo throughout the day, as soft and enduring as the morning light itself. Night settled over London with the quiet authority of fog, soft and deliberate. The streets glimmered faintly beneath the gas lamps, their light refracted in puddles and mist, painting the cobblestones with gentle amber hues. Inside his rooms above Baker Street, Dr. Whitby moved carefully, the click of his boots muted by the thick rug beneath. Candles flickered along the shelves, casting elongated shadows that danced lazily across jars, vials, and tins of powders. The small blue elixir from Mrs. Thorne, the golden laudanum, and a dozen other remedies were arranged with deliberate precision, their colors catching the flame in quiet bursts of light. Whitby dipped a silver spoon into a small jar of powdered clove, inhaling its warm, spicy aroma. He sprinkled a fine dust into a vial of honeyed syrup, watching it dissolve slowly. The movement was hypnotic, each grain of powder drifting like a tiny star into liquid amber. He paused, listening to the faint hum of the gas lamp above, its steady rhythm blending with the distant murmur of the city. Somewhere beyond his window, a horse snorted, a carriage rolled softly over cobblestones, and the fog pressed close against the glass. All of it was quiet, muted, as though the night itself had bent its edges to accommodate the careful act of creation in this small room. Whitby lifted another vial, a translucent green liquid, and poured a few drops into a small glass. The mixture shimmered, refracting the candlelight into tiny flashes that reminded him of sunlight through autumn leaves. He inhaled deeply, letting the scents of mint, clove, and faintly bitter herbs wrap around him like a soft cloak. Each tincture, each powder, each carefully measured drop had its purpose. Some soothed pain, some eased fear, and others, like the blue elixir, guided restless minds toward gentle rest. In these quiet hours, Whitby was both creator and witness, a guardian of calm in a city that never truly slept. He set the vials carefully on the desk, arranging them by hue, by scent, by the rhythm of their use. The act was slow, deliberate, almost meditative. His thoughts drifted to the patients who would benefit from these remedies, the quiet relief that would ease them into calm sleep, the subtle magic of careful touch and gentle tincture. And as he worked, the city beyond his window hummed softly, wrapped in fog and gaslight. In that room, with candlelight flickering and tinctures shimmering, Whitby allowed himself a slow exhale. The night had come fully, and with it, the promise of quiet, careful rest, for both healer and patient alike. The clock on the mantel ticked softly, each sound stretched and softened by the heavy fog outside. The city had quieted almost completely, leaving only the occasional clip of hooves or the distant creak of a shutter. In his rooms above Baker Street, Dr. Whitby moved slowly, deliberately, as though each gesture were part of an unhurried ritual. He lit a single candle on the worktable, its flame small and steady. Shadows pooled along the shelves, settling around jars of powders and vials of tincture. The blue elixir caught the candlelight, glinting faintly, as if holding some secret memory of the day's patience. Tonight, Whitby sought to create a new mixture, one that could soothe even the most restless of sleepers. He began with a base of honeyed syrup, thick and golden, and added powdered clove, letting each grain swirl slowly into the viscous liquid. The scent rose immediately, warm, sweet, and faintly medicinal. Next, he poured a few drops of laudanum, watching it blend seamlessly with the honey. The golden liquid shimmered, reflecting the candlelight in tiny, gentle waves. Whitby inhaled deeply, savoring the scent, a soft, hypnotic perfume that seemed to slow the very air in the room. Finally, he added a single drop of the blue elixir. It floated briefly before sinking, leaving faint streaks of silver in the syrup, like moonlight reflected on a still pond. Whitby stirred the concoction slowly, deliberately, letting the ingredients merge while listening to the soft hum of the gas lamp above and the distant murmur of fog against the window. He paused and tasted a tiny drop. The flavor was delicate, sweet, metallic, warm, and it carried a subtle sensation of calm that spread from tongue to chest, slowing the heartbeat just enough to let the mind relax. Whitby allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. In the silence of the night, with candlelight flickering and the city hushed beneath fog, he prepared the mixture for delivery to a patient who had struggled with sleepless nights for weeks. Each motion was careful, deliberate, almost ceremonial: pouring, sealing, labeling. Every detail mattered, for it was not merely a remedy, but a passage to quiet, a lullaby in liquid form. Whitby leaned back in his chair, watching the candle flicker. Outside, London breathed softly under the fog, streets empty, roofs glistening with moisture. Inside, the tincture waited patiently, a promise of rest, a gentle whisper in the night. And Whitby, feeling the weight of calm settle around him, allowed himself to drift toward the same soft stillness he intended for his patient. The room was quiet now, save for the soft hum of the gas lamp and the distant echo of a horse's hooves on wet cobblestones. Candles flickered, their flames dancing faintly across the walls, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to stretch toward the ceiling. Dr. Whitby sat at his desk, his hands folded over the last vial he had prepared, the final tincture for the night. The blue elixir, mingled with honey and laudanum, shimmered softly in the candlelight, reflecting colors that reminded him of dawn before it had fully arrived. He inhaled slowly, savoring the mingled scents of clove, mint, and the faintly sweet perfume of laudanum. Each aroma seemed to slow time itself, drawing the edges of the room inward, softening them, wrapping everything in gentle warmth. Whitby allowed his gaze to wander over the neatly arranged tools and bottles. Each had its purpose: a powder to ease pain, a tincture to calm, a drop of elixir to guide the restless into sleep. Tonight, every element had been placed with care, each motion deliberate, measured, unhurried. He picked up the small silver spoon and let a drop of the final tincture fall onto the counter, listening to it catch the light for a moment before settling. One last act, small but significant, the final drop of night, a whisper of calm to carry the city's sleepers through the remaining hours before dawn. Outside, the fog pressed against the window, thick and soft, muffling distant sounds and wrapping the streets in silver stillness. Whitby leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, letting the warmth of candlelight and the lingering aroma of remedies settle over him. The city slept, the patients rested, and he, too, felt the weight of night ease from his shoulders. The hour was late, yet the world did not rush. In the hush of Baker Street, in the amber glow of the lamps, Whitby allowed himself a final, deep exhale. Tomorrow would bring patience, errands of care, but for now, there was only stillness, only calm, only the quiet satisfaction of a night spent easing aches, fears, and restless minds. And as the candle flickered one last time before its flame winked out, the room surrendered fully to darkness. The city beyond, softened by fog, held its breath. The last drop of night had been poured, and all that remained was the gentle, endless promise of sleep. The first light of morning seeped softly through the fog, a pale gold brushing over London's rooftops and wet cobblestones. Gas lamps still flickered faintly, as if reluctant to surrender to the day, their amber glow mingling with the nascent sunlight to create a gentle, dreamlike haze. Dr. Whitby descended the narrow staircase from his rooms, careful with each step. The city was quiet, hushed under the last vestiges of night, and the fog pressed closely against windows and doors, curling along the streets like a soft ribbon of silver. He carried his small satchel of tinctures and powders, each carefully arranged from the night before. The air smelled faintly of clove, honey, and the lingering sweetness of laudanum, a reminder that rest had passed through these rooms and left its calm behind. As he stepped into the street, the fog seemed to wrap around him, softening the edges of buildings, muting distant voices, and carrying the delicate aroma of his remedies like a whisper along the lane. The city itself seemed to respond to his presence, moving slowly, thoughtfully, as though it, too, understood the need for gentle beginnings. Miss Blackwood opened her window to the street below, brushing a lock of hair from her face. She inhaled the cool, damp air, feeling the ache of the past weeks ease even further. Somewhere in her mind, she carried the memory of Whitby's careful hands, the silver pliers, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of his work. The morning light seemed to cradle that memory, softening it into a quiet sense of relief. The young boy, now awake in his room, gazed at the fog curling around the lampposts outside. He remembered the rocking of the chair, the hum of the gas lamp, the flicker of candlelight on Whitby's tools, all woven into his dreams like a soft lullaby. The city beyond his window moved gently, and he felt a calm that stretched from night into day. Even Mr. Gray, observing the fog from his rooftop, sensed the lingering trace of night's remedies. The ache that had haunted him, subtle yet persistent, was now diminished, softened by the careful work of Whitby's hands and the quiet magic of tinctures measured in candlelight. And as London's streets began to awaken, slowly, deliberately, without hurry, the fog carried the faint whisper of the night's remedies. It threaded through windows and alleys, brushing over the city like a gentle reminder that calm, care, and relief could survive the night and enter the first light of day. The morning fog lingered like a soft veil over London, pressing gently against shopfronts and cobblestones. The city moved with a careful, unhurried rhythm, distant carriage wheels hummed softly, shutters creaked, and faint voices echoed across the streets, muffled and melodic. Dr. Whitby walked slowly, his satchel of tinctures swinging lightly at his side. He paused at each doorway, delivering remedies to those who had requested his care the night before, a drop of honeyed syrup here, a powdered clove tincture there. Each motion was precise, deliberate, and unhurried, as though time itself had slowed to match the pace of his hands. Through the fog, the faint aroma of laudanum mingled with the crisp morning air, carrying a subtle calm that brushed over the city. Shopkeepers arranging their wares paused for a moment, inhaling the soothing scent, while a passerby adjusted her shawl with a quiet, appreciative sigh. Miss Blackwood stepped lightly along the lane, clutching her cup of warm tea. The ache in her jaw had vanished entirely, replaced with a gentle calm that seemed to extend beyond her body, a quiet energy flowing outward, harmonizing with the soft rhythm of the fog-laden streets. The young boy ran his fingers along the railing outside his window, watching Whitby's deliberate movements. In his mind, he replayed the rocking of the chair, the hum of the gas lamp, the shimmer of silver pliers, all blending seamlessly into the fog, forming a quiet soundtrack of relief that echoed along the streets like a soft, invisible melody. Even Mr. Gray, walking carefully to his rooftop garden, noticed the subtle transformation. The ache that had pressed against his jaw the night before now felt distant, like a memory softened by time and care. Every step through the fog was cushioned by the residual calm Whitby's remedies had left behind, and the city seemed to hum in quiet appreciation. The streets themselves, usually bustling with urgency, were now tempered by the lingering presence of careful, deliberate healing. Every scent, every sound, every soft movement carried the memory of night's care into the morning light. London's heartbeat slowed, echoing the rhythm of those who had trusted in Whitby's hands. By the time the first clear rays of sunlight pierced the fog, the city felt suspended between night and day, rest and activity. The soft, invisible threads of healing wove through the streets, carrying calm and relief to every doorstep, every window, every mind willing to receive it. By mid-morning, the fog began to lift, revealing London in soft, muted light. Roofs glistened with dew, cobblestones reflected the pale sunlight, and the distant sounds of awakening life, merchants calling, horses' hooves, and shutters opening, blended into a gentle symphony. Dr. Whitby walked deliberately along the streets, his satchel now lighter, having delivered tinctures and powders to every patient who needed them. Each step was measured, almost meditative, as if he were moving in harmony with the city itself. Miss Blackwood stepped into the soft sunlight, feeling the warmth spread across her shoulders. The calm from Whitby's care lingered like a gentle halo around her, guiding her movements, softening the edges of her thoughts, and coloring the day with quiet serenity. The young boy ran along a lane that had recently been shrouded in fog. His laughter, light and free, echoed faintly, carrying the calm of the night's remedies with it. He imagined the rocking chair as a small boat on a quiet river, and in the soft morning light, it seemed as real as the streets beneath his feet. Even Mr. Gray, now moving across his rooftop garden, felt a gentle harmony in the rhythm of the city. The ache that had once troubled him was gone, replaced by a subtle awareness of the soft pulse of life around him. Every whisper of wind, every distant footstep, every hint of scent carried a quiet reassurance that the world, for all its bustle, could still hold moments of rest. Whitby paused near a narrow alley, inhaling the mingled scents of clove, honey, and faint laudanum that had drifted with the fog. He smiled softly, realizing that the remedies he had prepared in the candlelit hours of night had woven themselves subtly into the morning, influencing not only bodies but thoughts, hearts, and the gentle rhythm of the city. The streets, now bathed in pale sunlight, seemed to move in quiet harmony. London's heartbeat, softened by care and patience, echoed through alleys and lanes. Each passerby, consciously or unconsciously, carried the calm of Whitby's touch with them, a quiet inheritance from the night's deliberate rhythm. And as Whitby continued his walk, he knew that the city, like his patients, had entered a gentle state of balance. Night's remedies had whispered through the streets, blending into the fog, the dawn, and the quiet pulse of daily life. Harmony, he realized, was not always grand or loud. Sometimes, it was the subtle art of careful, deliberate care, leaving behind traces that lingered long after the candle was extinguished and the fog had lifted. The sun had begun its slow descent, spilling soft amber across the rooftops of London. Shadows lengthened along the narrow streets, curling around doorways and lamp posts as if reluctant to let go of the day. The city's pace softened, every footfall, carriage wheel, and shuttered window moving with a deliberate calm. Dr. Whitby stood at his window above Baker Street, watching the evening fog curl lazily between buildings. The scent of coal smoke mixed with the fading sweetness of flowers in small gardens, carrying a subtle warmth into the quiet street below. He gathered his tools and vials, preparing for the evening's patients. Each movement was measured, deliberate, and unhurried, silver pliers polished to a soft gleam, powders arranged in neat rows, tinctures shimmering in candlelight. The ritual itself seemed to soothe the air, creating a quiet bubble of calm that separated his room from the distant bustle of the city. A faint knock at the door announced the arrival of a patient, a young woman with a persistent toothache, her expression tight with discomfort. Whitby greeted her gently, offering a warm smile. "The evening is soft," he said. "We shall make it easier for you." She nodded, easing into the chair as Whitby prepared the remedies. The room smelled faintly of clove and honey, comforting and warm, while the candlelight flickered over the gleaming instruments. Each sound, the soft clink of metal, the rustle of fabric, the subtle hum of the gas lamp, blended into a slow rhythm, almost like a lullaby for the mind and body alike. As he worked, Whitby noted the transformation in his patient. The tension in her jaw softened, the ache seemed to recede, and her eyes, previously tight with pain, relaxed beneath the gentle light. The evening shadows carried the calm of the room outward, merging with the soft fog beyond the window, touching the streets of London like a quiet, invisible balm. Outside, the city moved slowly, yet purposefully. Footsteps echoed softly over wet cobblestones, distant voices blended into a muted chorus, and the fog pressed gently against lamp posts, windows, and doorways. Whitby felt the weight of the day ease from him as well, carried away by the quiet focus of his work, the measured rhythm of care, and the slow, deliberate magic of evening calm. By the time the patient rose, her ache diminished, the streets outside were painted in dusky light, the fog curling softly between buildings, carrying the subtle, lingering scent of relief through the city. Whitby closed the door behind her, inhaled deeply, and allowed himself a quiet moment to watch the evening unfold, a pause before the night's next careful rituals began. Twilight draped the streets of London in soft shades of grey and amber, the fog thickening gently as night approached. Gas lamps flickered to life, casting small, golden pools of light across cobblestones slick with evening dew. The city seemed to breathe slowly, each movement softened, each sound cushioned by the mist. Dr. Whitby prepared his evening remedies with deliberate care. The silver tools gleamed faintly in candlelight, tinctures shimmered like liquid jewels, and powders were arranged in neat, precise lines. Each action was unhurried, a soft choreography designed to carry both patient and practitioner into quiet calm. A knock at the door announced another patient, a young man troubled by a persistent toothache that had followed him throughout the day. Whitby greeted him with calm reassurance. "Evening is gentle," he said softly. "We shall ease the ache before the night settles." The young man settled into the chair, and Whitby began the ritual. A drop of honeyed syrup mixed with powdered clove was carefully applied, followed by the subtle shimmer of the blue elixir. The room filled with the warm, sweet aroma of herbs and tincture, blending with the faint scent of coal smoke drifting through the fogged window. Each movement Whitby made was deliberate and slow, the soft clinks and whispers of his tools merging into a quiet, hypnotic rhythm. The patient's jaw relaxed, tension eased, and even his breathing seemed to synchronize with the gentle cadence of Whitby's work. The outside world, the muted sounds of distant footsteps, the soft rolling of carriage wheels, the whisper of fog, became part of the room, part of the quiet spell that calmed both mind and body. Whitby paused briefly, letting the moment linger. The twilight light outside seemed to press gently against the windowpane, casting shadows that danced in time with the candle's flicker. The patient's relief was subtle but tangible, a soft wave that seemed to extend beyond the chair, beyond the room, and into the fog-laden street. As the treatment concluded, Whitby carefully prepared the remaining vials and powders for the next patient. The quiet focus of his work, the deliberate pace, and the faint scent of remedies blended seamlessly with the deepening evening, creating a cocoon of calm that seemed to suspend time itself. And as he watched the young man leave, stepping softly into the fog-wrapped streets, Whitby inhaled deeply, savoring the mingled aroma of clove, honey, and laudanum. Twilight had settled fully over the city, and with it came the promise of rest, quiet, and the gentle passage of evening into night. Night settled over London like a soft, velvety blanket. The fog thickened, curling along rooftops and alleys, muffling distant footsteps and the occasional creak of shutters. Gas lamps glimmered through the mist, their warm light diffused into gentle pools that made the city feel suspended, serene, and private. Dr. Whitby moved slowly through the quiet streets, his satchel of tinctures and powders carefully balanced. Each doorway, each window, each step seemed to hold a rhythm of its own, attuned to the lingering fog and the soft pulse of the city at rest. His evening patients had received their remedies, powders to ease aches, tinctures to calm nerves, and drops of the blue elixir to guide restless minds into sleep. The subtle effects of his care were already visible: shoulders that had carried tension now relaxed, brows smoothed, and eyes that had been tight with discomfort now softened in quiet relief. Whitby paused at a corner, inhaling the mingled scents of clove, honey, and faint laudanum carried on the damp air. The aroma blended with the fog, seeping into the streets, brushing against lamp posts, shop fronts, and the few lingering pedestrians with a whisper of calm. The city itself seemed to breathe more slowly, as though it, too, had received the quiet remedy of the night. He watched as Miss Blackwood's shadow disappeared through a fog-drenched lane, the young boy's laughter faintly echoing from a side street, and Mr. Gray's calm silhouette moving across his rooftop garden. Each figure carried the subtle imprint of relief, a testament to the soft, careful work that Whitby had performed under the candlelight. Returning to his rooms above Baker Street, Whitby placed his empty vials and silver tools carefully back on their shelves. The room smelled faintly of clove and honey, a lingering memory of the night's gentle labors. He paused, letting the quiet settle around him, thick and soft, like the fog outside. The city beyond, now fully asleep, held its own steady rhythm, the occasional roll of a carriage, the whisper of fog against walls, the distant murmur of river water, all muted, softened, blending seamlessly with the calm Whitby had cultivated. Nightfall carried quiet relief, and with it, the promise of uninterrupted rest for every patient and for the city itself. Whitby sat back in his chair, inhaling deeply, letting the slow, deliberate calm of evening wrap around him. The streets were still, the lamps glowed faintly through the fog, and the city, like the people within it, drifted toward sleep, cradled in the gentle rhythm of care, patience, and quiet attention. The city of London lay beneath a thick blanket of fog, hushed and still, as if holding its breath. Only the faint flicker of gas lamps cut through the dense gray, casting small, wavering circles of amber light onto the slick cobblestones. Above Baker Street, in the quiet of his rooms, Dr. Whitby prepared for his nightly experiments. The hour was late, a time when the city itself seemed to pause. Shadows clung to every corner of his study, candlelight reflecting off the polished silver tools and glass vials that lined the shelves. Each instrument glimmered softly, waiting for his careful, deliberate hands. Whitby began with a small tray of powders, measuring each with meticulous precision. Clove, mint, and the faintly bitter herb known as valerian were blended into a fine dust, their aromas rising slowly, curling through the room like a gentle fog. He inhaled deeply, letting the scents calm his thoughts, slow his movements, and set the rhythm for the experiment to come. He picked up a vial of golden laudanum and poured a few drops into the mixture, watching the liquid shimmer in the candlelight. Tiny trails of light danced across the surface, catching the edges of his tools, the glass of the vials, and the faint silver of his instruments. Whitby stirred slowly, deliberately, allowing each ingredient to merge fully while the distant city remained hushed, as if it, too, were watching and waiting. Tonight, his goal was subtle yet ambitious, a tincture that could ease not just pain, but restlessness, anxiety, and the lingering tension that sometimes clung to patients even after treatment. Every drop, every grain of powder, every deliberate motion contributed to a slow alchemy that seemed to unfold in time with the candle's flicker. A soft knock at the door reminded him of the few patients who still needed care in the midnight hour. He moved to greet them with a calm smile, gesturing toward the chair bathed in candlelight. The room smelled of clove, honey, and faint herbs, a gentle cocoon that seemed to suspend thought and carry the body into quiet ease. As he worked, Whitby noticed the subtle hum of the gas lamp, the muffled footfalls of a distant carriage, and the whisper of fog pressing against the window. Each sound, each movement, each faint aroma contributed to the hypnotic rhythm of the midnight hour. The experiments were more than remedies. They were lullabies in liquid form, delicate acts of care that extended from his hands into the sleeping city beyond. Whitby paused, letting the candlelight dance over his carefully arranged vials. The mixtures shimmered softly, promising calm, rest, and subtle relief. In the hush of Baker Street, beneath fog and night, he allowed himself a slow breath, feeling the quiet magic of midnight practice settle over him like a warm, protective shroud. The fog outside thickened, curling around lamp posts and windows like a soft, protective veil. London's streets were quiet now, muffled under the weight of night, with only the occasional distant carriage wheel breaking the stillness. Inside Baker Street, Dr. Whitby prepared for a patient who had requested his care at the late hour, a man restless with discomfort, wandering the edges of wakefulness and insomnia. The candlelight flickered over the polished silver tools, casting long, gentle shadows across the table. Whitby inhaled the mingled scent of clove, honey, and laudanum, letting it settle over him as a calm rhythm guided his movements. Every gesture was deliberate, each step in the ritual slow and measured, designed to soothe both body and mind. The patient entered quietly, his eyes wide with fatigue, jaw tight with discomfort. Whitby greeted him with a soft smile, gesturing toward the chair bathed in warm candlelight. "The night is gentle," he said. "We shall carry the ache away, and allow sleep to arrive softly." The man settled into the chair, and Whitby began the midnight ritual. A powder of clove and valerian was carefully applied, followed by a drop of the golden laudanum and a trace of the shimmering blue elixir. The faint aromas rose immediately, curling through the room like a warm fog, pressing gently against the edges of awareness, and coaxing muscles and nerves to release their tension. Outside, the distant fog shifted softly, carrying the faint sound of Whitby's careful work into the quiet streets. The patient's breathing slowed, his shoulders dropped, and his eyes softened as the tinctures worked in quiet harmony with the soothing candlelight and the hypnotic rhythm of Whitby's hands. Whitby paused for a moment, letting the calm settle fully over the room. The midnight hour was thick and still, a cocoon of quiet that separated the patient from the restless city beyond. Each drop of tincture, each gentle movement of the hand, and each flicker of candlelight seemed to carry the ache away, leaving only warmth, calm, and the soft promise of sleep. As the treatment concluded, the patient leaned back, feeling the subtle ease of body and mind. The ache had softened, replaced with a gentle comfort, and the night itself seemed to hum with quiet relief. Whitby watched him rise, steady and calm, and step quietly into the fog-shrouded streets, carrying the remnants of midnight care with him. Returning to his desk, Whitby arranged his vials and powders once more, the faint scent of remedies lingering in the air. Outside, London remained hushed, streets wrapped in fog, lamps glowing softly, and the city breathing slowly, rhythmically, as if lulled by the careful, deliberate work of a single man above Baker Street. London lay under a thick blanket of fog, soft and unyielding, muffling footsteps, carriage wheels, and distant voices into faint, soothing echoes. Gas lamps glimmered through the mist, casting gentle, wavering pools of amber light across the wet cobblestones. The city moved with a hushed, deliberate rhythm, as if it, too, were surrendering to sleep. Dr. Whitby returned to his study above Baker Street, his satchel empty, his tools polished, and the final tinctures of the night arranged carefully on their shelves. The room smelled faintly of clove, honey, and valerian, a soft fragrance that lingered like the memory of calm. He paused at the window, looking out over rooftops shrouded in fog. The streets below were silent, save for the occasional distant rustle of a curtain or the faint hum of a lone carriage. Each shadow, each flicker of lamplight, seemed to carry the subtle influence of his midnight remedies, easing aches, softening minds, and coaxing the city itself into quiet harmony. The patient from earlier that hour walked home slowly, the subtle relief from Whitby's care pressing gently against his shoulders. His steps were light, measured, unhurried, a reflection of the calm that had been woven into his body and mind by the tinctures and powders crafted in candlelight. Whitby inhaled deeply, letting the calm settle over him as well. The midnight hour had ended, but its quiet magic lingered, a soft, invisible thread running from the silver tools, the golden syrup, and the blue elixir, through the patient, into the streets, and across the sleeping city. Outside, the fog pressed closer, muffling the final murmurs of the city. London's heartbeat slowed to match the gentle rhythm of the night, every building, every alley, every lamp-post participating in the silent, shared breathing of a city at rest. Whitby extinguished the candle, leaving only the faint reflection of moonlight on polished silver. The room fell into darkness, still and quiet, yet filled with the lingering presence of care. Every ache eased, every restless mind calmed, and every corner of the city, from Baker Street to the distant fog-bound alleys, drifted into gentle, uninterrupted sleep. And as Whitby finally leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes, he felt the subtle weight of satisfaction settle over him. The silent city slept, cradled in the delicate, invisible embrace of his midnight remedies, a city softened, soothed, and carried gently into dreams by one careful, patient hand. The pale gold of dawn stretched gently across London, brushing rooftops and cobblestones with soft, delicate light. Fog lingered in quiet pockets, curling along the streets and lamp posts, holding the city in a slow, dreamy embrace. Dr. Whitby rose from his rooms above Baker Street with deliberate care. The city was stirring softly, shutters creaked, distant hooves clattered faintly, and the faint murmur of early voices blended with the scent of damp stone and faint herbs drifting from his window. He gathered his satchel of final remedies, powders, tinctures, and the last remaining drops of the shimmering blue elixir. Each vial was placed with precision, each powder measured with care, and every movement followed a quiet rhythm cultivated over countless nights of patient attention. His first patient of the day arrived quietly, a young woman whose toothache had lingered stubbornly through the previous week. Whitby guided her to the chair bathed in the soft morning light, and the familiar scent of clove, honey, and faint laudanum wrapped gently around them, a soothing cocoon that softened the edges of discomfort. The patient settled in, and Whitby began his careful ritual, a drop of syrup, a dust of powder, a trace of blue elixir. Every motion was slow, deliberate, designed not only to relieve physical pain but to calm the mind, ease the heartbeat, and encourage the gentle drift into rest. Outside, the fog pressed against windows and alleyways, carrying the faint aromas of Whitby's care across the waking streets. Shopkeepers paused to inhale, children still nestled in sleep stirred faintly, and the subtle rhythm of early morning seemed guided by the invisible thread of calm his remedies wove into the city. Whitby paused to observe his patient's expression, the tightness in her jaw softened, her eyes relaxed, and her breathing deepened. The morning light, the lingering fog, the faint scent of herbs, and the measured rhythm of Whitby's work created a harmony that stretched beyond the room and into the streets of London itself. The first light of this final day felt different, tempered by the gentle weight of care accumulated over countless nights and evenings. Whitby inhaled deeply, letting the sense of clove and honey fill him with the quiet satisfaction of a city slowly brought to ease, one patient at a time. And as the city began its day, soft and unhurried, Whitby prepared for the next moments of final care, aware that the calm he cultivated would ripple outward, blending the end of night, the dawn of day, and the lasting relief that marked the conclusion of this patient journey. The streets of London were bathed in soft, golden light, still tempered by pockets of lingering fog. Every step Whitby took was deliberate, echoing quietly over cobblestones damp from the morning dew. The city moved slowly, as if it had learned the gentle rhythm of his nightly and early morning care. Whitby's satchel carried the final tinctures and powders, each measured carefully in the stillness of dawn. Today's rounds were quiet, unhurried, the culmination of weeks of remedies, patient attention, and gentle, deliberate work. His first stop was a narrow lane where the young boy, now fully awake, awaited a gentle check of his aching teeth. Whitby greeted him softly, and the boy's tense shoulders relaxed immediately under the calming influence of the familiar scents of clove and honey. Each drop of syrup, each careful motion, guided the boy into quiet comfort, his small body adjusting to the rhythm of relief Whitby had perfected over countless nights. Next, he visited Miss Blackwood, who had risen early to greet the day. Her face was softened by the lingering effects of Whitby's previous care, yet a faint ache reminded him that one final treatment would complete her rest. He worked slowly, deliberately, letting each tincture blend into the subtle warmth of morning light, the aromas curling through the room like invisible threads of calm. Even Mr. Gray received his final remedy, the ache that had accompanied him for days now dissolved into quiet ease. Whitby observed each patient carefully, ensuring that the last traces of tension and pain were eased, replaced by a gentle, almost dreamlike calm. Outside, the city carried the soft echoes of Whitby's work. The fog was thinner now, the sunlight brighter, but the gentle rhythm he had woven through the night lingered in the streets, in the subtle sway of branches, in the quiet murmur of distant voices. The city itself seemed aligned with the calm he had cultivated, a living extension of the careful, deliberate work of one patient healer. As Whitby completed the last of his rounds, he paused at the top of Baker Street, looking over the city he had softened. Cobblestones glistened in the sunlight, the fog retreated slowly, and London breathed in a quiet, harmonious rhythm. His final drops of tincture, his last careful gestures, and the lingering sense of clove, honey, and laudanum had left the city cradled in gentle relief. Whitby returned to his rooms, placing the empty vials on the shelf, inhaling the quiet, comforting fragrance of his work. The last rounds were done. The city rested in calm, every patient eased, every ache softened, every restless mind guided into peaceful ease. The rhythm he had cultivated over countless hours, night and morning, held steady, and the world felt suspended, serene, and completely, quietly healed. The sun had climbed higher now, scattering the last remnants of fog across rooftops and alleyways. London lay bathed in gentle light, streets quiet, softened by the lingering traces of morning dew and the subtle influence of Dr. Whitby's careful work. He returned to his study above Baker Street, sat in his chair, and exhaled slowly. The tools and vials from the night and morning's remedies gleamed faintly in the soft light, arranged with the precision and care that had carried his patients through countless aches and restless hours. The room smelled faintly of clove, honey, and the subtle sweetness of laudanum. Whitby closed his eyes, allowing the scents to wrap around him, carrying him gently into a state of quiet reflection. He thought of the young boy whose laughter now rang light and free, of Miss Blackwood who moved through her morning with ease, of Mr. Gray whose tension had dissolved into calm. Each life touched, each ache eased, formed an invisible rhythm that now pulsed softly through the city itself. The streets below remained quiet, every footstep deliberate, every shuttered window still, every distant sound softened by the gentle care that had threaded the night and morning together. The city seemed to breathe in harmony with the calm Whitby had cultivated, its pulse steady, slow, and serene. Whitby let his gaze drift to the window, watching sunlight glint off rooftops, water dripping gently from eaves, and fog retreating to hidden corners. The final calm had settled over London. The aches had been soothed, the restless minds lulled, and the city itself carried the lingering trace of care and patience, soft as a lullaby. He leaned back, allowing himself a slow, deliberate exhale. The rhythm of night and dawn, of tincture and powder, of clove and honey, had reached its natural conclusion. All was still. All was quiet. The city slept, cradled, soothed, and softened by one man's careful hands. And as the sunlight warmed the room, Whitby closed his eyes, joined in the final calm, and let the serene weight of his work carry him, too, into quiet rest. The world beyond the windows moved softly, deliberately, but within the gentle boundaries of Baker Street, time had paused. Peace prevailed. London rested. The final calm had arrived.